an incredible performer this year. It's up about 53%.
It's a week of high expectations for many Mag 7 stocks.
The stock's sitting here at an all-time high heading into earnings.
But earnings data in companies this big impact much more than just individual stocks.
This money, this spending trickles down into them too.
MarketBeat's Chris Markoch breaks down earnings expectations for 5 Mag 7 companies and what it could mean for the broader market.
Investors are going to want to be listening to what the company has to say about their outlook on the state of the consumer.
Could this week of earnings move the market even higher? Let's dive in. Chris, so great to have you for one of our Market Beat in the Mountains shows this week. Really huge week for the market, especially some of those Mag 7 players that are getting ready to announce their earnings report this week, just 24 hours away. And Chris, there's a lot of expectation in the market right now with the new highs that we're hitting for all of these companies. Just in general, before we dive into the specific stocks, what's kind of the outlook for this mega week of earnings?
The general sense is that it's going to be a strong week. I think markets are going to be paying close attention to what each of these companies has to say regarding capital expenditures related to AI. In the first quarter, we saw Amazon made, I think it was a $100 billion commitment for this year. Microsoft said $80 billion. Meta was for $72 billion. When Alphabet reported last Thursday, they increased their spending commitment this year. So there's some sense that maybe one or all of these three companies are going to do the same. Interesting thing will be, what does that do for each of the stocks?
I think that investment in AI is what everyone is watching. I know we have a lot of investors who own these big Mag 7 companies. We have other investors who like the smaller companies, but we pay attention to these because it matters to all of them. That investment in AI trickles down to many other of these smaller companies that we cover, many other names that we cover too. So talk about that a little bit, Chris, just the implications on the broader market just from these, 4 Mag 7 companies that are going to be reporting this week.
Yeah, well, I don't think it can be understated. But let's look at just a company, NVIDIA. If you're going to see an increase in data center spend from any of these three companies or all of them, that really then just says NVIDIA is going to be a strong earnings report in a few weeks. And boy, I mean, get ready for that one. But you're right. The AI revolution, this is benefiting a lot of those smaller companies, a lot of the companies that we've been talking about on this channel that are part of that AI narrative. And you're right. This money, this spending trickles down into them too, because the AI build out's going to be not just for the hyperscalers, but it's going to trickle down to those other companies that support that cloud infrastructure and that AI infrastructure.
Yeah, so this is an earnings week, not just for these 4 companies we're gonna dive into here, but it's also just an implication for the entire market, especially the AI sector. So a really interesting conversation and all companies we wanna pay attention to. Let's start with the giant that everyone is watching right now that's continuing to see just an incredibly solid year, and that's Microsoft. What's the expectation for Microsoft, and what are analysts and investors going to be watching closely for this company?
Well, I think the expectation is that Microsoft's going to do what Microsoft does, and I think that the expectations are for a beat on the top and bottom line. I'm not sure if there's really any bullish sentiment one way or the other as far as whether or not they're going to increase the capex spending. But I think one of the things that people are going to be really paying attention to with Microsoft is going to be if there's any more information, or as the analysts like to say, color provided regarding what's looking like it's going to be some sort of separation from OpenAI. That's going to be a key thing. We've already seen Microsoft announce several layoffs that are attributed to the rise of AI and the fact that it's taking some jobs that no longer need to be done by people. And that's been actually very positive for the stock. The investors have been rewarding the stock for that and for the efficiency that that's bringing. But I think really, in addition to any other spending on data centers, I think the key for this report is going to be what's going on with the OpenAI relationship and how that might impact the stock going forward.
Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people are going to be paying attention to with Microsoft. I think the question everybody has about earnings for any company, but even giants like Microsoft too, are what's happening with the stock price right now and what can we expect pre or post earnings? What would cause a big spike or a big drop in the stock either way? What are we seeing so far in Microsoft's chart this week?
Microsoft stock is actually down just slightly on the day as we start the week. I don't think that surprises me too much. The stock's sitting here at an all-time high heading into earnings. It's at $512 a share. The PE is high at 39 times forward earnings. It's at what? Yeah, it's about 39 times earnings and 39 times forward earnings, which it's expensive, but the stock's been worth the premium so far. Some analysts are saying you could see a price of up to $600 for the stock. So there is upside here, but it's not really surprising to me at all that investors are kind of let's not get crazy here. Let's give the stock somewhere to run if they do have a blowout earnings report. And if the earnings report for some reason disappoints at all, that's where it may get a little bit more interesting. But I really think that you're probably going to see a little bit of stability with Microsoft, probably not much happening either way to the upside or downside until you get clarity on those results.
Is there anything that would cause a company of this size to see a big move in either direction?
With Microsoft, I think so much of it's probably already priced in. I mean, you'd have to see a massive beat to the upside to see that happen. If there was some sort of other trade deal announced, perhaps with India or perhaps with, it's not going to happen. But if something were to happen with China, that would certainly be bullish for, technology companies. But other than that, no, I don't see anything that's going to make it a huge mover other than just the fact that the stock has momentum. But again, this stock's trading really close to its consensus price target right now. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a tendency for the stock to move just a little bit lower to give the investors a little bit better return on getting into the stock.
Yeah, many investors are looking for those bigger returns right now and just looking for growth. If that's you and you're looking for more of those small cap, high growth names, you don't want to miss one of our latest free premium articles that we have just for our YouTube viewers right now. This is a list of 5 high risk, high reward stocks that all have serious momentum right now. You can scan the QR code now or click the link we have for you in the description of this video to get that list right now on marketbeat.com. All right, well, let's move on to the next major Mag 7 company that's going to be reporting this week, and that's Meta. This company also has had a really fairly strong year. What are we expecting this earnings?
Meta's been an incredible performer this year. It's up about 53% for the 12 months, and it's about 22% for this year. But as most investors know, tech stocks got wiped out earlier in the year, especially heading in with the concerns over the tariffs. But since about mid-April, early May, which would coincide with the company's last earnings report, the stock's been on a tear. It's been up 30%. Again, this is a company that just keeps reporting the fact that they're going to spend on data centers, spend on data centers, spend on data centers. An announcement that came out last week from Mark Zuckerberg is that the company is planning to construct a 1 gigawatt data center named Prometheus, and they've got plans to add data centers with up to 5 gigawatts of more capacity than what they have now in the future. So clearly, this company is all in on that sense. You've been seeing movement in the company in terms of the smart glasses. You could say they've leapfrogged Apple in that arena. Just a lot of bullish things going on heading into the earnings.
And this company is so interesting to see the diversification it's adding. It's no longer just a social media platform; it's way more of a tech company, and we're seeing that in the market valuation for this company and the continued stock rise. I want to talk a little bit more about any concern from investors or institutions on the amount of capital that Meta is investing right now in these data center buildouts. Is there any concern that they're getting too big too fast? Or is it more like what the stock price is suggesting? And that's that investors and people are just excited to see this growth and new investment from the company.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly over the last 3 months, the latter has been true. Investors got excited because when all three of these companies announced such major spending in data centers, it proved that the AI trade was alive and well. I do think there is some concern here in the short term that you're gonna be able to monetize that investment at some point. I don't know if that's something that investors will punish these companies for this quarter, but it's something that I think investors are going to have to be watching for over the next several quarters is okay, you're putting all this money into building out these data centers, but when is that going to come across? When are you going to be able to monetize that? That's a concern that's out there, but I don't think that's a concern that's out there for this quarter or this earnings report.
Very good. Well, let's talk about this quarter and this earnings report. Do we expect to see any major moves with Meta with this report on Wednesday?
I'm expecting that you're gonna have a very good quarter from Meta. I think you're gonna see strong earnings, strong revenue. I would imagine that investors are gonna be very curious to hear if they're planning on doing more in the realm of capex spending. What are their plans as far as AI and generative AI go and agentic AI? But more importantly, this is a company that, they've been now delivering on a lot of the things that they say they're going to do. And if we remember just 2 or 3 years ago, Meta wasn't always great at doing that. So investors are going to want to make sure that there's more of the same there.
All right, so more of the same for Meta. What about the other tech company that's more of a wild card this earnings season, and that's Apple? They've had a rough year, and so I think there's a lot of anticipation for what's coming up with their earnings on Thursday, simply because it's been such a rough past couple of quarters for Apple.
Yeah, I look at Apple and I say, I think Apple's got the lowest bar to clear. I also think that they probably have the lowest upside if they do clear that bar. And that's because I've been an Apple fan for a long time, but I have to admit that right now I'm probably more a fan of the company than I am of the stock. They've been slow announcing and firming up what their plans are as it relates to artificial intelligence. And originally, there were a lot of people that said, well, Apple has a history of they're not the first, but then they get in and they're the best. Well, now people are starting to question if they're going to be able to get in. And if they do get in, are they going to be the best? We don't know. I don't expect Apple to provide a lot of color to that when they report earnings. What I think is the best thing that a lot of investors can hope for is that you're gonna see that service revenue is still strong, that iPhone revenue is better than feared, and I think if Apple can clear those 2 hurdles, I think they'll be okay. But, right now, Apple's got a very low bar to clear, which, like I said, they may clear that, but I just don't know how much upside is in the stock right now.
Yeah, I think that elephant in the room of everyone questioning where is Apple in the AI story is what investors are looking at right now. It's what the overall market is looking at right now. And it will be interesting to see if Apple can come out and have some kind of announcement of this is where we are planning to get involved in AI. But like you said, is this not something you're expecting this earnings season yet?
I'm not. I there's nothing that's really been happening that would say, "Boy, that was something I didn't expect." Having said that, boy, if Apple were to pull something out of their hat and really surprise investors with something that had some substance to it, that could be something to really watch for. I'm not expecting that. Still, you could see a scenario where Apple beats on revenue, beats on earnings, raises their guidance, and it might be bullish for the stock. But again, I'm just not sure how high that ceiling is for Apple. I think their ceiling's probably a little lower than the other stocks that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, let's dive into what's happening with Apple's chart right now. I want to finish the discussion on Apple with just do you see this as a value play right now? It's down because of all the reasons we just said, but do you see the stock catching up in the future? Is this a good time for investors to be looking at getting into Apple or maybe waiting for this earnings report? If it disappoints, could it drop even lower? Just wondering how, if people believe in Apple and want to add some stock or maybe get into it for the first time, is now a time?
There is some evidence that the stock's been starting to consolidate since around the middle of April. It seems to have found support at around a level of around 195. The problem is it's showing resistance right about the level it's at now. If they report solid earnings, you might see it break to the upside. Analysts have a consensus target on it of 234, but that's only about a 10% upside to where it's at right now. And JP Morgan Chase they have a price target of 250. Wedbush, that's Dan Ives, he has a price target of 270. So they're seeing something that other people aren't seeing probably. But again, I'm not sure if I see it this quarter. Apple would have to make some sort of dynamite announcement that we're just not hearing yet.
Good analysis of what to expect with Apple right now. Well, let's get to one outside of the tech sector a little bit, although it's still very much a tech company in its own way. Let's talk about Amazon.
Right.
What has this company been doing? It's been a really big summer for Amazon with their Prime days. What are we seeing in their stock right now, and what are we expecting for earnings?
Yeah, so you're right. Amazon's sort of been it's only up about 6% this year, but again, like the other companies we've talked about, it's up about 24% in the last 3 months, which again correlates to the last time they reported earnings. They announced a $100 billion spend for the data centers this year. Obviously, a company like Amazon with their AWS, they need data center capacity. And again, a lot of these hyperscalers, they've got to build these things from the ground up. They can't just take something and retrofit it. So that's been part of the story. But again, with Amazon, as investors know, you're dealing with the two-headed company. You're dealing with that AWS division, but you're also dealing with that e-commerce division that we all know about. Amazon just had their Prime week. Certainly, investors are going to want to be listening to what the company has to say about their outlook on the state of the consumer, because if the consumer is showing signs of slowing down, or did the consumer front load a lot of their end of the year purchases and already started trying to take care of some of that. So that could have some effect on what's going to be happening in the broader economy going forward. As you've pointed out, they have a reach into a lot of areas of the economy. That's what makes this earnings report so interesting.
Yeah, about that retail side for Amazon, their Prime Day did have about a 30% increase in spending from 2024. So really strong performance from consumers out there. And I think that that's the important thing to look at with this data from Amazon is that there is still strong consumer sentiment out there, and that has an impact on Amazon's business for sure. But I'm curious, Chris, to have you talk about, is this company so diverse with its data center and that AWS side of Amazon that even if there is a pullback in consumer spending and consumer caution, can Amazon still grow even if there is an impact from consumers just because their company is seeing so much of an increase in AWS?
I think that's a good way to look at it, Bridget. I'm looking at analyst targets, and right now, Amazon's trading only about, and I say only, but only about 9.5% below the consensus target. But I've seen just in the last week, Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, they've raised their price targets on Amazon to around 265, 266. So that's about $10 above the consensus. So you are seeing some bullish sentiment heading into earnings. So if Amazon delivers a strong report, I could certainly see there being upside to the stock. And again, you're right. This is a company that for the last few years, they've had that problem where in 2021, they were really firing on the e-commerce side of the business, but maybe not so much in AWS. And then AWS outperformed, but maybe not e-commerce. We might be getting into that time where both parts of the business are really starting to perform at a level that investors are excited about.
Yeah, and I think some of the exciting numbers are going to be out this earnings report. Those prime numbers, that retail side will be out. It'll be interesting to see what the
Right.
AWS numbers are for Amazon too. So definitely something investors are watching to see if there's any big swings pre or post earnings, or if there's enough of an announcement here to really move the dial on Amazon a little bit. I do want to end this conversation, Chris, by talking about one of the Mag 7 stocks that did report and did see some movement, and that is Alphabet and Google. They reported last week, and we did see some movement in that stock.
They reported on Thursday night after the market closed, and you saw in the pre-market Friday, the stock shot higher. But you did see as the day went along on Friday, the stock pulled back from that high a little bit, although it never made it back down to where it was before the earnings report. So the stock is still up since earnings, but it lost a little bit of that. I think that's where an interesting part of this comes in, Bridget, is because all of these companies, the Alphabet and the three we talked about today, there's the huge data center narrative. But after that, each one of these stocks still has their own separate narrative that you have to factor in when you consider the outlook for the stock. In the case of Alphabet, you still have some skepticism about where the search business is going, how much of that business is going to be impacted by AI, and again, with with the other 3, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, there's all separate concerns. So really you're starting to see that decoupling of the Mag 7, and yet at the same time, as it relates to data center spending, they're all tied together.
Yeah, really good point, that they're all unique, they're all different, so it's worth watching and following all of them, and we will do just that here on MarketBeat. We
Yep,
will have, different articles. I know, Chris, you're gonna be writing a couple articles kind of evaluating when these earnings come out.
yep.
We will for sure talk about, what happened and what comes out of these earnings in our MarketBeat Monday next week, so be sure to join us for that as we kinda dive into what we find out in earnings report. And again, don't forget that these Mag 7 companies also have some huge implications for some of those smaller cap companies too. We'll talk about that on our Market Beat Monday too, and we'll have some other videos on the channel diving into some of those smaller companies too, and how the announcements coming out this week from the Mag 7 could trickle down and impact some of the smaller companies tied to AI too. So stick around for that too. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and as always, happy investing.